This podcast is for the part of you that's tired of being shaped by systems that silence your soul. Hey, I'm Jane. I'm a sovereign Reiki reclamation mentor and spiritual visionary. That's more than just a label, it's the truth of who I am at my core. My mission is to co create an integrity rich spiritual industry where authentic personal power isn't gatekept, distorted, or diluted, it's liberated, embodied, and honoured. So I'm here to dismantle what distorts and restore what's sacred, sovereign, and soul led. I don't break the rules to rebel, I shake up to return to integrity because sameness breeds self doubt. When we're constantly trying to fit in, we start to question what's real for us, drifting further from the voice within that already knows the way. True connection isn't found in replication, it's found in reclamation. Over the past year, I've been giving myself the space to unhook from what no longer fits as a mentor, to loosen the grip of old layers, old noise, and listen instead for what's still aligned underneath it all. The truth. The catalyst was when I got weary from the flood of advice, the constant stream of noise dressed up as guidance, information overload, the speed, the regurgitation, the do this to get that formulas everywhere I look in the Reiki world. Information isn't intrinsically bad, yeah, but we're so quick to move on when things don't shift fast enough, so quick to chase the next shiny promise that claims to know what's best for us. And so I've been settling in, been working with resistance, grounding deep into my spiritual authority and into questioning my values and how I'm embodying these within my soul-led purpose as a sovereign Reiki reclamation mentor so that I could take steps continuing to move forwards from a place of devotion and not distortion, because I'm not here to convince anybody that my way is the way. Who wants that? Who needs that? I'm not here to hook anybody in with clever tactics, not here to polish my way of working or my offerings, to give way to performance over presence. I genuinely believe that every intuitive senses when they are ready for this work. Because this work, it's not for the masses. It's not for the ones who want a quick fix or are waiting to be saved. It's for those who crave depth, value integrity, respect personal truth, to walk their own path, to trust what they feel, even if they can't explain it yet. What I've found for me is that where most offer theoretical formulas, I unearth wisdom to embody. Where most claim to hold all the answers, the how, the way forward, I create conditions for you to uncover your own. And where most provide band-aids, I cultivate unapologetic empowerment that activates lasting, true sovereignty. And in claiming that this is the only way that feels ethical for me to be, to work, to embody, I've found that resistance isn't a wall. It's a whisper of intuitive clarity, a sacred signal from the soul that something deeper is stirring beneath my surface. When my body tightens or doubt roars loud or something just feels off. This resistance is the threshold of truth, asking to be met with curiosity. When I can just let that be, let that unravel naturally and not force an outcome from a place of control, not have to know the answers now. The recognition of resistance for me holds a mirror to what actually matters the most. It reveals perhaps where I've been trained to shrink, trained to conform, to bend myself into a shape that just doesn't fit because I should, or because there appears to be no other way cognitively. For me, I don't need to be told how. I don't want a blueprint or a cloned map. much like those that I work with. I've lived enough to know that dancing to my own rhythm is the only option that actually works, right? So you sense that you're your own teacher. That's why burning more cash on mainstream spiritual courses of any kind doesn't seem to satisfy. You've moved beyond being taught by external answers. You crave being witnessed in your own mastery. And isn't that a thing of absolute beauty? When we can pause and reflect and say, this resistance, whether it's guiding me towards or away from something, is actually calling me to a new way. We might not always be able to explain the why, it just is. What I've found is that split second when innate knowing calls, but conditioning pulls. Personal power is either seized or surrendered. When what once felt true no longer fits, spiritual evolution takes root. And that's happened to me many times on my path to sovereign Reiki practice. Two are really coming to mind here, and I'm going to share those with you. The first, I was slumped over a treatment bed. My initial training was in Usui Reiki. And as I'm slumped over this treatment bed, client had just left. I prepped for another client coming in. I had a steady stream of clients, yeah. To the external eye, I was successful. But my hands were dangling off the side of the bed. And as they're dangling, I didn't just know, I sensed, I felt so deeply that my practice was routine. It was methodical. It was perfunctory. There was the vibrancy, the sparkiness, that deep sense of inner fulfillment that I really was craving from knowing that I was living and working in alignment with the core of who I am. Where was it? It just wasn't there. Which kind of leads me to my second sharing. To try and fill that gap in search of filling it. What did I do? I went and did my Reiki Masters, which might seem like a really odd thing to do, right? Doesn't it? Given what I'm saying, given how I was feeling, what was I thinking that Reiki Masters was going to flip how I was feeling on its head, magically transform that somehow? I don't know. That's what I did. And I recall what I had to do for Reiki Master certificate to get my qualification. I had to create a booklet that I was to give my Reiki Master. And what she said to me was, this booklet shouldn't be like mine. It should be yours. Needs to have your stamp on it. That was the exact words. Needs to have your stamp on it, Jane. And I'm thinking to myself, how does this work? I have no idea how to make this my own. I do not know how. What I was actually saying now on reflection is, I don't know how to ground my intuitive insights or access spiritual wisdom and bring that into reality. Because all I've been taught is how to follow, how to do it the same way. So what you want me now to do is do it a little bit differently, not 100% the same as you, but I don't have the ability to do it differently. I don't physically have the skills. You want to know what I did? I cobbled together a booklet to get my qualification that reflected none of who I am or how I now mentor just to get the qualification, because I needed to. But every part of my soul was saying, Jane, this is not right. But I went against it with seemingly no other option. And shortly afterwards, I couldn't keep going because all of me was saying, pause, help yourself out here. You sense this is not right. You sense there's a lot missing. You sense there is deeper. You sense there is more. And that's the thing with my specific skills. I see the heart of a matter really clearly. I feel to the heart of a matter really clearly. I recognised I had to step away from what I'd built up that had all the markers of success to the external eye. I had to stop practicing. So I left behind that title of Reiki Master, which I've never picked up again. And for the next about 5 years, I actively sought out spaces to grow within where disagreement didn't mean disrespect, but instead difference invited deeper understanding. I immersed myself in research and shamanic learning, skill building. Really interestingly for me, cultivating just worldwide connections, really beautiful connections, where I listened to diverse Reiki training stories and experiences, all whilst following the guidance of my spiritual team, building, fostering that relationship with spiritual wisdom to create the roadmap forward that I truly needed. This wasn't a blueprint handed down from someone else. This was the pathway I had to carve for myself. A road forged in the fires of experience, of intuition, spiritual wisdom. And that's the roadmap that has become the pathway that I now mentor. And it was a real homecoming, a returning to myself, to the depth that I had longed for, to the genuine healing expression and fulfillment in life and work that had eluded me for so long. I'm somebody who's walked a really long path of searching, of hunting down knowledge like it sits at the top of the tree. I chased qualifications, certificates, accolades for years after entering into the holistic industry in search of soul deep fulfillment. But true abundance, both internal and external, I couldn't call it in until it was anchored within me. So inevitably, I reached a ceiling of what my mind could grasp intellectually. And that's when I realised soul level transformation doesn't happen on the mental plane stacking up the textbooks. It happens when you move beyond the intellect by surrendering to intuition and spiritual wisdom and embodying the truth uncovered there. It's about expansion, not limitation. It's about liberation, not conformity. It's about expression, not restriction. Sovereign energy practice doesn't ask us to swap one dogma for another. It invites us to return to our own personal wellspring of power, a power that nobody else can define for each of us. Let's be absolutely clear. The teacher's way is not the way. There's no universal sequence, no required persona, appearance, lifestyle, or diet to access Reiki. Moreover, mainstream replication says we must be given access by someone higher up the ladder, through levels, through lineage, through a system that keeps us reaching outward. But what if? Connection was never meant to be passed down through hierarchy, but simply remembered from within. Because reclamation says no rigid rules, no energetic outsourcing, no gatekeeping what's already ours to claim. We don't need to be given access to Reiki. We just need to remember. What I had a great aptitude for most of my life was mental, energetic body processing and intellect. Back to that knowledge at the top of the tree. I was book learned my whole life. I used to read the dictionary as a teenager when my friends were reading magazines, right? I do inherently have a pull, a thirst for knowledge, but that tipped the scales for me. And I replicated more of the same when I entered into the holistic world. But I was searching for a different outcome, wasn't I? I was no longer trying to pass school exams or my degree or research an article as a journalist. I craved fulfillment, connection. I was yearning for an abundant internal and external landscape that was so deep purposeful. And I sensed so deeply I held the power within me to impact others' lives positively. I only later realised that the meaning of life for me was to find my purpose, but the purpose of my life was to give it away, and not from this place of sacrificing myself at the altar of giving freely or giving from obligation. And I'll share more on that in my journey with that as an intuitive, empathic person next episode. But from a place of genuine truth and alignment, from a place of liberation and real integrity. Essentially, I had a hunger to be an authentic leader, walking my talk, not preaching how to do things or the right way to do things. I wanted to be a lighthouse, not for attention, but because I felt a profound calling to be the presence for myself and others that I'd actually been searching for my whole life, but didn't identify that I really truly needed most of the time whilst on autopilot. External outsourcing had been quite the go-to for me. I always searched for the answers outside of myself, be it books, teachers, methods, anybody in a perceived position of authority, I would listen to without question. Which now, I can hardly identify with that way of being, but I was shackled. It was so strong. And I'm not dissing books, teachers, methods, but what I am saying is that as an intuitive, I was never going to thrive inside any system that didn't place value on depth, on personal truth, on expression, on liberation, dogma, following scripts, restriction. As an intuitive person, I inherently resist methods that box me in. They're not going to work for me. They can't work for me. No matter how much I read about them, try to implement them, try to adapt them a little bit, try to make them work for me. That meant the likes of the teacher's way is the way. There are symbols to use in a specific way for specific things. There's an order to do things in, a tick list. There were rules like I can't practice sitting down. I had to be healed to heal others. I couldn't eat certain foods or drink certain drinks. I had to trust my intuition. But without having any real guidance to support me in being able to do that within a culture who doesn't play, we don't place a huge amount of value there. I was to use self Reiki to help with all things instead of having the emotional and energetic tools that I needed to support myself to thrive when self Reiki uncovered personal healing areas for me. I was to ground more when I felt flighty and chaotic working with clients, like that was going to make up in some way for a lack of energetic protection. These are all examples of gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is the act of restricting access to spiritual wisdom or authority based on artificial rules, rank, or identity. So with Reiki, therefore, I found myself in a loop, a never-ending search to honour my own one-of-a-kind truth, craving deeper, sense that there was more, seeking to feel connected to my soul-led work and create the type of impact in the world that innately I sensed that I could feel so deep. It was like an ache. I sensed I was here to craft. I'm going to share with you something I've learned for myself on my path. And this for me changed the very fibre of the way that I lived and went on to practice Reiki from a place of real sovereignty and that authentic leadership I spoke about having a thirst for. Sovereignty, soul remembering, and spiritual authority are like a sacred triangle. Spiritual authority being our embodied, solid, unshakable truth that surfaces when we stop outsourcing and start trusting what's already inside of us without needing any external permission. And this for me is an evolutionary process. I don't just embody my truth and that's it done. I'm constantly growing, shifting, shaping, meeting new layers and depth within myself. So spiritual authority naturally isn't a destination to achieve, it's an unfolding to be present within. And it's never about claiming power over anything, over others. It's about standing in truth within ourselves. And for me, this actually speaks to what I've become weary of that I mentioned right at the start of this episode. Performative spirituality, the illusion, ideas of grandeur, the noise of this is the right way to do Reiki, the rigid hierarchies, the idea that anybody else in some way holds the key to any of our power. is perpetuated by the inaccurate belief that mastery comes from external, like validation, rather than from the raw, unfiltered connection with our own essence. And my experience is perpetuated by those in the Reiki industry who position themselves as gatekeepers, convincing practitioners that true mastery lies in following their methods, their lineage, their version of spirituality, rather than being a transformational guide, leading authentically and grounding their intuition and spiritual wisdom to trust their intuitive insights. Then obviously from that place of truth, integrity, honor, supporting other people to do the same. Because spiritual authority means our actions, choices, life is anchored in integrity. Energy work flows from alignment, not imitation, when it's grounded in spiritual authority. And spiritual authority, I've come to learn, is a culmination of soul remembering and sovereignty. And it was sovereignty that I was seeking, that is to embrace my inner power, my unique skills and gifts, my innate strengths. But to do this, I also had to remember the soul of who I am. Knowing who I am on a deep, deep level, the coming home to myself, the depth that is left when all masks slip away. There were many gaps in all of that for me, but today let me share on soul remembering. On some level, I was always participating in soul remembering since coming into the holistic world. I was on a path of healing. I was aware that my personal healing journey had impact on how I practiced and also how I could support other people. But what was missing for me was emotional and spiritual integration of that healing on the journey of soul remembering. I didn't just need to know using the mental body, knowledge, and intellect. I needed to feel. I wanted to feel. I craved feeling by processing the gems found in the emotional body, which would make way for a greater clarity and strength of my intuitive connection. And then I needed to embody spiritual wisdom that came from my relationship to the higher power that I believed in. For me, that's the divine nature and shamanic guides. For others in my community, that's God, Goddess, Mother Mary, Source, angels, so many options. So our intuition is ours, it belongs to us. Spirit led wisdom, on the other hand, is the guidance open and available for us to harness at all times to enhance our life and practice in a way that knowledge, mental body, and intuition, emotional body, can't provide. It's the unseen intelligence that exists beyond the edges of what might appear seen or possible. The practical ability to lead with authenticity as a transformational guide, trusting intuitive insights, comes from spiritual authority. That's sovereignty and soul remembering. If you feel that this episode has unearthed a truth for you and you feel called to meet that shift with presence and confidence in your unique energy work, I've dropped a free practical workshop inside an area of our free community called Embodied Echoes after the pod. What you can harness within embodied echoes is always designed to amplify your spiritual authority, specifically related to the episode that you've listened into. And I'm going to be doing this following on from most episodes now. This week, we're diving into sovereign reclamation of the four energetic bodies: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, to realign with your innate power, anchored to the truth of who you are, not just in knowing, but in feeling and in being spiritually connected. Because it's from here in my experience that blocks in leading authentically in our exclusive energy practice, they dissolve, making way for genuine soul-led expression and impact. If you're not already with us in our free online community, it's a non-guru community with no hierarchy or all-knowing behaviour, because dogma and spiritual hierarchy isn't the one in my experience. Collaborative connection and shared wisdom very much is. You might already be sensing that, because Sitting inside mainstream Reiki communities often can feel like choking inside a gilded cage. Truth traded for toxic conformity, experience wielded like a weapon to silence others, individuality is stifled for compliance. Here, we don't follow, we liberate. We don't obey, we expand. We don't go with the crowd, we cultivate our own path together, which means it's not a space where your voice is silenced if it sounds different or where your questions are met with judgment. Also, inside our free community, you can connect and collaborate professionally with energy workers worldwide inside our monthly Reiki mixers. And you can gather, if you feel called to, inside our peer tent, a circle of like hearted energy workers committed to sovereign growth and shared evolution. Now, I've dropped the link, should you feel called, in the podcast notes for you. And I really look forward to connecting with you again, either inside our community or right here next episode. Dogma and spiritual hierarchy isn't the one. Collaborative connection and shared wisdom is. But you already know that, because sitting inside mainstream Reiki communities is often like choking inside a gilded cage. Truth traded for toxic conformity, experience wielded like a weapon to silence others, individuality stifled for compliance. So I invite you to my free online non-guru community with no hierarchy or all-knowing behaviour. Here, we don't follow, we liberate. We don't obey, we expand. We don't go with the crowd, we cultivate our own path together, which means this isn't a space where your voice is silenced if it sounds different or where your questions are met with judgment, because genuine heart-led connection and collaboration is rooted in truth, in trust, and integrity, where authenticity thrives, respect is embodied, and every unique voice is honoured as equal. Our community is home to monthly Reiki mixers where you can connect and collaborate with energy workers worldwide, a peer tent of genuine kinship where difference is celebrated, not censored, and embodied echoes after the pod, practical workshops and activities designed for you to amplify your spiritual authority. If a podcast episode unearths a truth for you and you want to meet that shift in your unique practice with confidence, the link's in the podcast notes for you.